Hello, I'm back. I learned fast. I hope I got it. I saw people were in the chat saying it's working as I was fumbling around, saying, "Is it working, guys?" So I think I got it. Cool. So let's react to Donald Davidson, anomalous monism, all that wonderful stuff that we were saying before. Should I just jump in? Yeah, watch that first video.
Difference between the mental and the physical realms. It is suggested that the real difference between the mental and the physical realms stems from Davidson's premise of the anomalism of the mental, the claim that there are no strict laws on the basis of which mental events can be predicted and explained. The rest of the session is devoted to Davidson's defense of this principle. Davidson remarks that since he wrote Mental Events, his arguments for the anomalism of the mental have changed somewhat, and then he now has three different, though related arguments. The first two are discussed at length in this program, but shortage of time prevented the third argument from being voiced. In brief summary, the third is essentially this. In applying mental concepts, our standards cannot in general be questioned, unlike our standards for applying physical concepts. Our knowledge of other...
So there were two arguments, but the third one that they didn't get to.
Two are discussed at length in this program, but shortage of time prevented the third argument from being voiced. In brief summary, the third is essentially this. In applying mental concepts, our standards cannot in general be questioned, unlike our standards for applying physical concepts. Our knowledge of other minds is the basis of our concept of objectivity, that is, our recognition of a distinction between true and false belief. However, possession of this concept of objectivity is itself required for propositional thought to be possible. Therefore, to question the standards of application of our mental concepts, we would have to question our standard of objectivity. But this cannot be done, since the standard of objectivity is the ultimate one against which all other standards are measured and compared.
So what the... Is this from his conceptual scheme stuff? What are they talking about here? My concept of objectivity comes from other minds when something is true or false. Belief comes from my knowing about other minds. That's what they're saying. That's what he just said right here?
Of objectivity. But this cannot be done, since the standard of objectivity is the ultimate one against which all other standards are measured and compared.
Okay.
Questioning our standard of objectivity would be as senseless as questioning the length of the standard meter bar. The session ends with a discussion of the difference in character.
Okay. I mean, I get the standard meter bar thing, I think. It's arbitrary. You pick one and you say that's a meter. And then someone coming along and saying, well, that's not really a meter. How do you know it's really a meter? That, of course, is a bit ridiculous since it's sort of picked as a standard arbitrarily somewhat. So questioning our standing of objectivity would be like that. There'd be nothing to compare it to, really, I guess is what they're saying, and say, is it correct or not, since it's... Well, how does that connect to this other person stuff? I guess I don't understand this argument. I'm not going to go and read Davidson's conceptual scheme paper. What is that called? A conceptual scheme on the very idea or something. Yeah, I don't understand. Does someone help me? Does anyone know what they're talking about here? I don't know.
Between psychological and physical explanations. Both kinds of explanation are causal, but Davidson holds that many psychological explanations, in addition, have an element of reasonableness to them. That no physical explanations have such an element of reasonableness. However, he observed that not all psychological explanations can have this added character of reasonableness, for otherwise there would be no accounting for irrationality. We now join the discussion at the London School of Economics.
Okay, that was weird.
Professor Davidson, today's topic of discussion...
Oh. Don't look at you. You mean don't look at the camera? Who is this guy and why is he? I thought this was Martin Davies going to ask the questions. Why is he going to introduce Davies again? What is going on here?
Is around the famous and now infamous paper, Mental Events, which you wrote in 1970. I wonder if you could actually give us some sort of idea of the flavor of the times. What was it that actually possessed you to write that particular paper at that particular time?
1970? Holy shit, that was before I was born. Okay, so I mean, Davidson is obviously famously associated with Quine. He was not Quine's student in the official sense of Quine being his advisor or something, as far as I know, but he was closely working with Quine during his time at Harvard, I think, was it? And so when he left, people did associate him. He was in a sense trying to out Quine or something like that in a way, like take the program all the way as far as he could. And they had some technical disagreements over the truth schema, Tarski and stuff. Okay, anyway, but so was he trying to fish for a Quine reference here? Is he trying to say who is influencing you? I mean, the mental events stuff is I wonder what his answer is going to be. Okay.
Trying to get some sort of a historical context to why you wrote that paper.
It's hard for me to connect the writing of the paper with anything particular that was going on then. In general, I think I very seldom have written papers that were designed to fit in with what people were interested in at the time. It was rather a matter of problems that presented themselves to me as a result of things I had done before. And since I was, there were two areas in which I've been working. One was philosophy of action, and the other was philosophy of language. And these two came together at many points in my career, but this was one of them. I had claimed in earlier papers that things that we think and want cause what we do. They also explain it in special ways, but...
Right, so you wouldn't think that would be a very controversial thing to say, that you have mental states and that they have some kind of cause. Like my desire to drink some water may cause me to move my arm in certain ways. But I guess there's a line of argument going from, I don't know, Brandom is who I would associate with. I guess Wittgenstein or somebody, who I'm not super expert on, but the idea that these things are subject to like normative constraints and physical cause and effect relations are not. I guess that's the reasonable stuff that he was talking about, right? That there's just a second ago when he was saying that there are certain, that it's reasonable to be in one psychological state and then have that lead to the next state. Like if you stole my wallet, it's reasonable for me to be angry. If I find out that I just misplaced my wallet, then it's no longer reasonable for me to be angry at you anymore. And those kinds of normative assessments, the physical transitions between physical states don't do that. What? Someone just popped up and said, "Hi, I'm a pea zombie. Any arguments against me, please? Thank you." Cool. The arguments against you being a pea zombie are that I know I'm not a zombie because I have conscious experience, and the laws of nature more than likely are such that creatures like me in physical states like this have consciousness. So unless you're something physically different about you, Thomas Wyndham, I'd say that's the argument against you being a pea zombie. Oh, but I'm trying to talk about anomalous monism, guys. I am not conceivable. Oh man. Bummer, but impossible.
The relation is, among other things, causal. And many people thought, and in fact I was concerned about this, how can mental events cause physical events? Or the other way around for that matter, since it's obvious that physical events cause mental events. Whenever we look and see something, something we naturally describe in physical terms most of the time, cause us to believe things or notice things. So I wondered how can these two sorts of things interact? And at the same time, I was convinced, along with many other people.
Okay, so that's just the mind-body problem he was talking about. That's not some Wittgenstein stuff. I went off on a whole. I went off on a whole tangent, apparently. Led down the rabbit hole. So okay, so he was just talking about how does the mental, understood as mental, interact with the physical. I mean, I think, yeah, because that's what anomalous monism is designed to do. It's designed to show the mental is the physical, so the mental interacting with the physical is the physical interacting with the physical, but it's also described to show the mental anomalous. You can't reduce it. Yeah, I think that's going to be up. I don't know. These live things stay up, right? I'm pretty sure it does. This is my first experiment with the living, but the streaming, I mean. But yeah, Shannon, I'll leave it up. Cool. All right, let's continue though.
That the concepts we use to describe beliefs, desires, and other mental states, and the concepts, for that matter, that we use to describe intentional actions, aren't reducible to physical, the kind of vocabulary that one gets in the natural sciences. So this presented me with a puzzle.
Right, so that's the anomalous monism is supposed to solve that puzzle right there. The puzzle is, A, we want to accept it as taken for granted that the mental causes physical goings ons, that there's mental causation. So we want that. But we also want there to be no reducibility from the mental, the predicates we use or concepts that we invoke when we talk about the mind, to the physical stuff. So the solution is to say, well, they're identical but not reducible, which is the core claim of the anomalous monism. Now, how you defend that, that'll be the interesting part. But all right, cool. I think I see where this is going. Oh, wait, I see someone saying, is it an argument for mental causation? Yeah, I think that's the point, is that we don't, so the mind, no one has ever, as far as I know, really questioned the idea that well, no, that's not true. I was going to say that the brain causes mental things. But you have parallelism, which is the view that there's no causal interaction and that there's sort of like, they just go in parallel. And then you also have occasionalism, which is that God has to perform a miracle to every time you want the mental to cause something physical. Okay, so but anyway, so there are people who have denied that claim that the physical causes something mental, but usually people don't. And the way they go is they say, well, how does the mental cause the physical? How does my wanting of something cause my moving of my body? And that's the mental causation stuff that I think you're talking about. And the anomalous monism here is supposed to be that the mental causes things because it just is the physical, even though mental stuff is not reducible to physical stuff. Well, I shouldn't say stuff. Mental concepts are not reducible to whatchamacallit. Yeah, so someone is saying it may be true that we can't reduce consciousness to physical descriptions. Right. So a limit of subjectivity, not an issue of ontology. Yeah, that perhaps is the case. I mean, as far as I understand it, anomalous monism of the kind that we're talking about here is a kind of physicalism, or at least it wants to be. That's the monism part. And it says, there's just one kind of stuff, the physical stuff. And some of that physical stuff is properly described as mental, even though you can't reduce the mental concepts to physical descriptions. So they're irreducible in that sense. I guess this kind of gets at a question sort of that you're bringing up about the different kinds of reducibility. So on the one hand, the kind of reducibility that Davidson here seems to be talking about is reducing concepts, like taking the concept, which is a mental concept or a mental term, and then showing how that concept really can be explained or understood in terms of other concepts that are not mental. And that's different than saying you want to reduce the ontological nature of the thing to something physical. And I don't think that's the kind of reduction that he's talking about here. But so I do think he is a materialist or physicalist, but he also thinks that there's no. So you might think, well, what's the difference here between your standard, type B physicalist who says phenomenal concepts? So there's no conceptual relations between the phenomenal concept and the physical stuff. There, I think that's going to be the law-like connections between mental states, because I'm pretty sure even the dualist is going to say there's some kind of law-like connection between the fact that you're in pain and what should follow next. But he wants to deny that, at least as if you're talking about the description in terms of pains. If you're talking about the descriptions in terms of physical states, then there will be laws that govern the transition of one physical state to the next. But if you describe that same set of states mentally, then there will be no law that connects them. That's why the mental is supposed to be anomalous on his view. I mean, I think that's the way it goes. We're only 7 minutes in and he's barely started talking. So let's hear what he has to say.
That one gets in the natural sciences. So this presented me with a puzzle. And I suppose that my prejudices were always monistic, that is, that there's only one kind of substance. And in fact, I found it hard to believe that there could be causal relations between two completely different sorts of substance. And in some sense, the physical world seems complete in itself. If you want to predict, explain.
Oh, did the screen just go blurry when I did that? It did. Okay, so I can't full screen the video and have it show over there. All right, good to know. Okay, but we can still see, hopefully, what he was talking about just then, which is that his reasons for being a monist and thinking that the stuff is physical and not idealism, because of course idealism is another kind of monism, as people well know. So he's here suggesting that his reasons for thinking for physicalism is true, I guess, or physical. But really, the idealists in the crowd probably are going to start popping up and saying this doesn't really answer that question, because if you're an objective idealism or objective idealist, then you're going to say, yeah, all that science stuff is just describing something mental, though. So to tell me that the physical universe seems causally closed is could be a fact about the cosmic mind or something. So I'm not really sure this is a great reason for thinking that idealism is false. You guys know me. I'm pretty open to various strange things, and I certainly am open to the possibility of idealism being true. But I guess what I would say is that in order to take idealism seriously, you first have to get some hard problem stuff. And I don't see any reason to take that seriously. Let's see, what's someone asking me about the phenomenal concept strategy? What is your response to Chalmers' master argument against it? Yeah, I don't know. I like the phenomenal concept strategy. The master argument is that basically either the concepts are robust enough to capture our actual acquaintance with consciousness, or they aren't. Um, if they are, then you have the same problems as before. And if they aren't, then the strategy doesn't work. They can't. So the same problems as before, according to Chalmers, you can't explain it physically, in terms of physicalism. Anyway, so I mean, I get off the boat at the same place I always get off the boat, which is at the beginning, which I don't really see the motivation for taking the hard problem so seriously. I certainly feel the pull of it. I like consciousness more than most people, I'd say. I like it lots, but I just don't really think that the conceivability of zombies or the explanatory worries generally, inverts, or all those sorts of things, I just don't feel the pull of them. I vacillate between being a kind of standard type B guy, says who cares about conceivability, or between saying great conceivability is wonderful, but zombies. And I know there's tons of things we could say about that, but I just yeah. So I think the phenomenal concept strategy, I wouldn't really rely on that as a way to diffuse the hard problem. Um, but I do think that everybody needs to say something about the kind of concepts that we use to think about our own experiences. And there's something there that that's not unique to physicalists. I mean, I think everybody has to say something. So yeah, I don't know if I really, in other words, I don't think you really need the phenomenal concept strategy in order to answer the challenge. But anyway, someone's saying they love to have me on their show. What show? I mean, sure, I'll go anywhere. I'll talk to anybody. Like, honestly, send me an email. Set it up. Let's see. Objective idealism seems much more parsimonious than all the extra clauses. I mean, no, it doesn't. The idealism seems actually less parsimonious to me because, well, there's no extra clauses that you need to add to save physicalism. First of all, it's nothing that needs to be saved from. I mean, I just find it so odd that people take this stuff so seriously that they think it just, yeah. Anyway, so I don't want to go off. I'm here to talk about Davidson, guys. Should I just do a general live stream where we just chat, because I like chatting with you guys, but I was planning on listening to Davidson. Someone's asking what's the reason phenomenal concepts can't be reduced. Well, I guess the challenge is always like, then do it, so is it because we have the wrong concepts of our conscious states? Wouldn't that be a form of illusionism? Yeah. Not to plug my own stuff, but what else are we doing on YouTube anyway? But I wrote a review of David Chalmers' book, Constructing the World, and I sort of took that line. My email would be on my website, onemoorebrown@gmail.com. Because so I think that everybody, now we're getting off topic. David, we'll come back to you, Davidson. I think everybody has to endorse illusionism of some kind. Who doesn't? Who isn't an illusionist of one version or another? I don't know anybody who doesn't accept some version of illusionism. Like even Chalmers accepts weak illusionism because consciousness presents itself as us being in Eden in Chalmers's version of that, but we aren't, right? It presents objects as having properties like it being colored and so forth, and smell and so forth. So that's a kind of illusionism. There's a property of consciousness which is not veridical. The way it presents itself is not veridical. So that is a version of illusionism. It's weak illusionism, and it's of something of that nature has to be accepted by everybody. It's only strong illusionism, which says phenomenal consciousness doesn't exist, that no one's ever felt a pain. It's only that version of illusionism that is the interesting version of illusionism, in my opinion. And nobody holds that view. And, you know, when I had Francis Camarera on my podcast, and he comes the closest to really being a strong illusionist in that sense. I mean, that's not true. In the published area, maybe. I mean, maybe out there, maybe Luke is one, right? Lucas, sorry, yeah. But yeah. So, by the way, thanks for the compliments. I see people saying nice things, and great. But anyway, so back to the Chalmers thing, I do think that if you have a certain conception of consciousness, like if you define it, if you say, look, here's what phenomenal consciousness is, it is the non-physical, irreducible, subjective, private, then yeah, that can't be a physical thing because you defined it in such a way that it can't be. So in that sense, yeah, I think that maybe some of the non-physical attributes might be illusionary. I don't think that means phenomenal consciousness is illusionary. Certainly, I wouldn't think that it's reasonable to say that if phenomenal consciousness minus the non-physical bit isn't really phenomenal consciousness. I don't know. Sometimes I do vacillate about that. Like if you said there's a Santa, but he's a skinny guy that lives down the street, and he never wears a red suit, and he's never fat, but he still delivers all the presents, then are you talking about Santa? I don't know. Those kind of questions get difficult, I guess, but it just seems to me, I'm not sure, once you really unpack strong illusionism, why we should take it seriously in the first place. Because the strong illusionist and the dualist and the idealist, they all begin from the same place, which is that there's something problematic about physicalism, and I'm not convinced by that claim. So I don't see any reason to go into those other areas unless you're accepting that there's some tension there, but there's no tension. What's the tension? I just don't get it. Seems like there's a tension, but I think there really is one. Anyway, can we go back to Davidson? The physical concepts are illusionary. Maybe he'll say something about this because he was that's how this all started, was him talking about his reasons for being a monist.
Describe physical events. It seems as though everything that affects them can be described in physical terms. So these are the sorts of issues that I was concerned with.
You mentioned.
I mean, that is an interesting point, though, because this is something I brought up with Bernardo too when I talked with him. But we don't need to appeal to anything mental to explain what the physical stuff is doing. Even if you're like a panpsychist, the mental stuff isn't part of the explanation of why the physical stuff does what it does. It's really, unless you're someone, I have heard people who'd say like, okay, the reason why opposite charges repel each other is because it's like being in pain. They go ouch and they bump away from each other, or they are attracted to each other because they like each other. Okay, that seems a little bit anthropomorphic there, but who knows, maybe that's the case. But barring some kind of situation like that, where then you would have a property of consciousness explaining why the particles behave in the way that they do, why they're the attraction and repulsion and are properties of these charges or something like that. But we don't appeal to anything like that. So then, but you might say, well, look, it's mysterious why the two things are attracted and why opposites, why one thing behaves in one way and why the other thing behaves the other way. The physicist says it's fundamental, well, I almost started talking like Philip when I said fundamental, didn't I? I heard some kind of accent come out. Anyway, okay, so Philip Goff is my man. Start talking about panpsychism, I turn into a guy from Yorkshire. Anyway, gosh, I get distracted too easy. That's why I don't do these things live, because I edit all this fucking shit out. Actually, I don't, do I? Okay, yeah. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we don't appeal to these mental things to explain the physical behavior and of physics, of fundamental physical entities. So that seems to be a reason to think that we don't need it at that level. I think that's what Davidson's saying, and I think that's a good consideration.
That there were other influences at the time. Would you mention a bit about some of the other players who were discussing the issues? I'm thinking sort of principally about, you mentioned in one of our discussions off camera about Stuart Hampshire and Elizabeth Anscombe at the time had influenced your thinking in action theory at that time.
Well, yes, that goes back.
All right, hold on. Stuart Hampshire and Anscombe. But hold on, someone's saying over here, causal closure seems to be a serious concern for those who reject physicalism. I'm not sure that it is. I mean, I know we like to say that, but is it? Because first of all, we don't know if causal closure is correct. I tend to think of it as an empirical hypothesis. But you could always wiggle out by saying the universe is not a closed system. And there are people who quibble about thermodynamics, and I don't know, it's all over my head, of course, but above my pay grade and so forth. But I think there's an issue there. But besides, there's always the issue of overdetermination and so forth and so on. But I mean, so just to say that I think, yeah, maybe you're right. So maybe I'll retract what I said. Yeah, it's a serious concern for those who reject physicalism. But it doesn't seem like a deal breaker. I mean, you could reject causal closure, and what would happen? I don't know. I mean, this is the David Papineau's article, which when he was on my podcast, again, I guess this is just me talking about my podcast a lot, but sorry guys, but when David Papineau was on there, we talked about that paper, The Rise of Physicalism, and he details the causal closure argument, I think, and that's in my opinion, one of the best places that if you want to find this kind of argument that Jay is bringing up here, the causal closure argument. It really only got popular in the last 100 years or so, and the reason was because it was becoming more convincingly the case that maybe we had some reason to think the universe was causally closed, but I don't think we know it. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting question, but certainly I tend to think that local versions of this are more convincing. So in the course of explaining how the brain works, we've never had to appeal to anything mental to explain why an action potential occurs. And we've never had any kind of weird causal gap where suddenly the brain starts to do something which isn't explained by something else occurring. But actually, people, I don't think we understand these issues well enough to be able to say the thing that I just said with like real conviction. I think it's reasonable to take that seriously, but I'm not sure that that it rises to the level of like it refutes the other side. But what do I know? I'm agnostic about most things and sit on the fence and wish-wash and so forth. All right, let's go back to this, though.
The beginning, really, of my publishing. And an intermediate event was that a student, a graduate student of mine, named Dan Bennett,
Dan Bennett,
not to be confused with several other people, while he was writing his dissertation, went to England and came back to Stanford, where I was teaching then, filled with
Yeah, see, that's going to be the Hampshire connections to Hampshire. So he was the Wittgensteinian, though, right? So that's why. So okay, Wittgenstein is going to come up, I think.
with the sorts of things that were going on at Oxford at the time.
Uh-huh.
And
What was going on in
Stuart
Oxford?
Hampshire's thought and action, and Hanscom's intention has
she's
come
definitely
out during that
Wittgensteinian.
period. And I became interested in his dissertation as I did in everybody's dissertation. I mean, I always sort of got fascinated with whatever people were grappling with. And there was this Wittgensteinian line, which everybody, or many people in England anyway, were buying at the time, which argued that the reasons why people act, let's boil that down for simplicity's sake to beliefs and desires. The reasons that they have in acting can't be causes of the actions, because there are clear logical relations between the descriptions of the contents of beliefs and desires and the way in which we describe the intentional actions that they explain.
Right.
And people thought they had learned from Wittgenstein, if there's, or even from Hume, if there's a logical relation, it can't be causal, because Hume had.
Even from Hume. So the relations of ideas and matters of facts, that's what's being brought up here. Relations of ideas, true by definition, matters of fact, learned from experience. So cause and effect are relations of not relations of ideas. So that in a way you could take Hume as showing that causal relations are different than logical relations. Interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, that is the consequence of the division. Okay.
Taught us that causal relations are contingent. And I thought there had to be a mistake in that reasoning. And that really is what got me started. Actions, reasons, and causes was an outcome of trying to reconcile all the things I thought they had right with what I thought had to go with that, and that is the causal relations between reasons and actions.
I mean, personally, this is not really related to what's going on here, but personally, I do find this kind of backstory to be the most interesting, to make some of the most interesting philosophy, where people have kind of contradictory, seemingly on the face of it, contradictory background assumptions, and then try to reconcile them by creating a way that they could all be true together in some new interesting fashion that people haven't thought of before. So I think that's when philosophers, that's one of the ways in which they can do really cool things, is by connecting, finding positions in logical space that other people had sort of thought were non-starters. I think that's a way of making progress. Anyway, okay.
So this went into mental events, because here again I was asking, how can there be causal? It's a slightly different problem, but in the same area.
Yeah.
How can we explain the fact that there are causal relations between things that seem to belong to such different domains?
But speaking of Hume, it's not like once you bring that up. So how can there be causal relations between distinct realms? It's easy. One follows the other. That's what Hume taught us. If A happens, then B happens, and if it's the case that if A hadn't happened, B wouldn't happen, A caused B. Doesn't say anything about them being physical, non-physical, like each other, not like each other. So I don't know. You could give once you have that as a serious view about what causation might be, constant conjunction, that Hume's basic idea, which we know is serious because David Lewis developed into a whole fucking serious, extremely serious program, which is still popular. Anyway, so I guess once you have that on the table, it's never really been as convincing to me that mental causation is as big a problem, no matter what your view about the mind is. You could be a substance dualist. That whole how does the non-physical cause the physical? I don't know. How does anything cause anything? So yeah. Anyway, that's a kind of tangent.
Let's pick up another point, just to cover the sort of complete the historical part of this. If I recollect correctly,
Where's Davies?
The paper starts out with a mention of Kant, and that there was, in a sense, a need to preserve agency. This has also seemed to be something that has run as a theme throughout your work. The sense of preserving human agency. That's something that is not to be entirely explicated in the closed system of physics. That's something that you begin mental events with and you end mental events with, returning back, and you hope that you've helped to shed some light on, or going some way towards solving Kant's problem. Had you closely studied this issue in Kant, or was it just that was the immediate historical antecedent that you picked up?
I'm afraid the latter is the truth. And this has happened to me quite often. That is, having come to something through a course of worry and thinking.
Wait, what's the Kant connection? He said agency. So wait, what is he talking about? That Kant thinks. Oh. Is it that so you have the phenomena and you have the noumena, and the phenomenal realm is all law-like and stuff. A causes B is true in there, and phenomenal realm is the realm of experience, and there it is, and there's a lamp, and so forth and so on. Cause and effect, wonderful, wonderful. But in the noumenal realm, things as they really are, or in themselves are, A causes B is not true. It's not even true that there's A or true that there's B. So there's no reducibility relations, you might think conceptually, between the phenomenal world of experience and the noumenal world of objective reality. I can't say objective reality, obviously, because noumenal world. Objective reality in Kant's language refers to experience. Objective reality is this. Not the noumenal realm, it's the phenomenal realm. So is that what, I never thought about that way, that connection. Does he even say that in his paper? It's been a long time since I read Mental Events. Huh. Okay, cool.
Arrived at some way of thinking about it. I then remember, or somebody reminds me, good heavens, somebody else had something to say about this. And so then I go back.
Good heavens. Oh. I don't want to make too much fun because this does happen a lot. It happened to me, actually. I wrote my dissertation and in metaethics, where I was talking about a view that I thought was interesting about the meaning of moral terms. And then in the course of researching it, I found out that someone had said basically exactly the same thing in the 50s. And no one had read the paper. No one had even cited it. It was this guy, Blackstone was his name. But it basically, I mean, almost like same thing. I was like, oh shit, not even someone as famous as Kant. So you know, it does happen, but why, you should expect that, right? Lots of smart people thinking about this stuff. It'd be pretty surprising if you were the first person to think of something cool. Maybe it's happened here and there, but anyway, oh golly, better say something about that guy.
Read through Kant, read through the Critique of Practical Reason, which I must say was not on the agenda when I was a graduate.
Critique of Practical Reason. So I was talking about phenomena noumena. That's Critique of Pure Reason. I don't really know the Critique of Practical Reason. It wasn't something that we read when I was in grad school. I mean, I know about it. I sort of know generally what it is about, but I'm not familiar with the details. That's where he has all that weird stuff about art and shit, amongst other things. Is that what's in there? I don't even. Yeah, see, I don't even know. What does that have to do with this? The critique of practical reason.
So that was new to me, and I was surprised at what I.
Oh, I see someone talking about wave functional realism, and here I'd love to check this out. Andre Gomez, I don't know that. I'll look at it. Wave function realism as applying to qualia. Interesting. I like wave function realism. Is that like the view that David Albert, is he a wave function realist? I don't know. Anyway.
Out there, I said, "Wow,
My meta-ethical views. Yeah, I know. I guess I never have done that. I should. I know. I finished my dissertation, put the thing on the shelf, and kind of forgot about it.
this is great." Kant says, on the one hand, something like determinism has to hold. On the other hand, we're free to act as we please. How can these? Well, the first thing is to realize both of those things are right. And now we have to.
Okay. That's in the critique of practical reason. I mean, that's basically one of the paralogisms of pure reason, right? Isn't it? That there's we have reasons always. That reason will always lead us to these opposite, contradictorily seeming views. The universe had a beginning. The universe didn't have a beginning. You can reason your way to both conclusions. Kant thought, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have got that, or something like that, does Kant talk about determinism in the critique of pure reason? Or is he only talking about, I can see why it's in a practical reason, because you have to act, and he's talking about, the will and stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, thank you. By the way, anyone in the chat can just call me Richard or hey you or that guy. Dr. Brown's very nice, but too formal for YouTube, guys.
Philosophical view that contradicts either of those must be wrong.
Yeah. Well, by the way, just to finish my earlier thought, that is a consequence of the phenomena-noumena distinction. In the phenomenal realm, everything's determined. In the noumenal realm, nothing is determined. So in the phenomenal realm, we don't have free will, but in the noumenal realm, we do have free will. So they're both true. Determinism and libertarianism, free will, are both true according to Kant, and not in that namely-pamely way that Hume thought, that it's we're determined, but you could call it free if you want. No, in this real way, it's really true that we're fully determined 100% in the phenomenal world, and also true that we're really, really not determined in the noumenal world. How you make sense of that beyond that, I don't know, but that's at least that is what Kant thought, I think.
So I was, I certainly better put Kant in here because he belongs here. But it wasn't as though I was reading Kant and trying to solve his problem.
Right.
Just one final bit that I'd like to cover with you.
No one can solve Kant's problem. He had like so many problems, dude. Kant.
On setting the historical background to the paper before we take up the actual theses that are presented in it. What about the legacy of behaviorism, thinking specifically of Gilbert Ryle's work at that time? What about the strong physicalist legacy in the case of David Lewis's work at the time? Was that an influence directly on you, or not so much?
Oh, well, certainly not Lewis. You say at the time, I guess I didn't even know that David Lewis was onto that sort of thing in 1970. Yeah. Is that right? Well, anyway, Ryle, I certainly had read Ryle with.
By the way, I mentioned this in my reaction to Lewis, but Lewis is one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century, the most widely cited, highly influential. I'm not saying that Davidson should have known about him, but I'm certainly saying that the interviewer was within his rights to ask if he was influenced by that kind of line, because Davidson's a materialist and Lewis is a famous, like, super materialist. um,
Care. Uh, he's only a behaviorist in a very special sense, it seems to
who, Ryle? Yeah.
me. Uh, that is one element in behaviorism was always straightforward reduction. Let's get rid of notions like belief.
Yeah. I mean, the word reduction causes so much problem because people mean different things by it. But yeah, so the behaviorists thought that you could, or at least some arch behaviorists who are, or at least caricatures of arch behaviorists, thought that you could define the mental terms in terms of behavior, that there would be conceptual, that there'd be definitional links, like, A believes phi. Okay, what does that mean? Well, they thought that you could say A behaves with respect to phi in various ways and fully cash out the notion of belief. I mean, in a sense, it doesn't make it's not too far-fetched, because if I believe that my pen is over here on the table, then I'm going to behave in certain ways. If I'm going to reach for it over there, I'm going to act in various ways, say, hey, hand me that pen on the table, say various things. And if I don't do that stuff, you're not really going to say that I believe it, right? If I say, oh yeah, the pen's on the table, I believe that's true, and then I start acting in all sorts of weird ways, saying, where's my pen, and looking around, then you're going to not really take me seriously. I would say that I believe that it's over there, because there is a kind of tie, we would say, between certain kinds of behaviors and attributing the mental states. And if you don't really believe me, then all you have to do is think about how we think about animals, non-human animals. So cats, dogs, chimps, etc. Now, ask yourself, do you think they're conscious or not? Do they feel pain? Well, that's a big, difficult question, but I think they do. And I think we can say reasonably, certainly, that they do experience certain things. What it's like to be them exactly, who knows? But that they're conscious, I don't think is something we should debate. I mean, I don't know. There are people here who want to say we're not conscious, so who am I? But anyway, so if you believe like me that animals are conscious, that they feel pain, experience loss, or taste of food, or see visual things, etc., even if it's different than ours, if you accept that, then on the basis of what do you accept it? Well, the only thing you have is their behavior. Now, of course, with other humans, you can make the same point too, but there we have language and people talk. But with your typical dog or chimpanzee, they don't talk to us, at least not in English or Farsi or any language we recognize. So, but yet, the point that I'm making is that we could become very convinced by the behavior of the animal, that they have these kind of mental states. And there's always these little wiggle rooms, and you could say this or that, but I'm just trying to convince us that we do take behavior very seriously. Now, the behaviorists of a certain kind thought that that's all there was to the mental state, that these conceptual definitions, I mean, it really is like a type A functionalism is what it turns into. That's the conceptual heir to this kind of hardcore behaviorism, which says that the mental states can all be defined in terms of their functional roles analytically, that you can tell by the meaning of the term that these are the behaviors associated with it. Once again, I don't think it's wildly implausible if you start thinking about like pains, like, invert scenarios. If you feel pain, is it possible, like conceptually, that there could be a creature that feels pain, but isn't bothered by it, doesn't worry about it, enjoys it even, says, I like this feeling. So, the same feeling that you have when I stab you, like, stab you like that. I don't know why I use such violent things. So if I tickle you with a feather on your foot, could someone have that exact same physical state and yet it feel painful, excruciating, like agony, like the way it would feel if you stepped on glass, and yet giggle and laugh and like, stop, tickles. I mean, I don't see the outright contradiction. So maybe it is conceivable, but it's not as easy as like, the red green invert case. So I do think there's once you start bringing in these other kinds of psychological states, it is it is less plausible that they can be disassociated from behavior in this way. Now, I'm not endorsing type A physicalism or anything like that. What I'm saying though is that the behaviorists were now out of their mind to say that there are these links between the way we use the mental terms, the criteria by which we apply them, and behavior. But where they went wrong, and what Davidson here is, I think, saying is that where they went wrong is in saying there's conceptual definitional links such that you could tell just by knowing the meaning of the term that it really is just such and such behavior. Yeah. Anyway, so that's enough. Let's go back to this.
Desire, intention, and so forth, and rather just talk about the things we observe people doing in a neutral vocabulary that doesn't use any of those mentalistic terms. Now, if I remember, Ryle isn't into that kind of reduction at all. So,
Yeah.
It's true that he wanted to get rid of a lot of machinery that many philosophers and psychologists had.
I mean, it's funny he uses the term machinery because, of course, Ryle's famous for that ghost in the machine metaphor, and that has led some people to accuse him of being a really hardcore behaviorist. Ryle, I mean, because he has that. What is his famous? I'm blanking on it, but it's like you show a person the one glove and you show them the other glove, and then they say, "Where's the pair of gloves?" It's the mistake is that they're treating the pair of gloves as something that's a category error. That's the word I was thinking of. That you're making a category mistake when you think that the pair of gloves is something that's distinct from the gloves there in front of you. The pair of gloves is the left and right glove together. That is the pair of gloves. So if I show you the left glove and I show you the right glove, then I have shown you the pair of gloves. And it's not reasonable for you to then say, yeah, but where's the pair of gloves? So Ryle's analogy there was when someone says, oh, here's all the behavior, and they say, yeah, but where's the mental state? Ryle thought, well, yeah, that's like asking where the pair of gloves is. Category error. Yeah, thank you. So, but the ghost and the real mistake that I think that Ryle, well, I want to say real mistake, but I do want to say that the actual mistake that Ryle is upset about is that people have taken this thing called the mind and said, well, it can't be physical, and then attribute it to this non-physical thing, but they're thinking of the non-physical thing as an object, as a physical thing. They're thinking of it as a machine, but a non-physical machine, as a thing which can be in states and undergo transitions and works in a certain way, and that they would make sense to explain how a thing like that worked. But the mistake here is that they're trying to think of this non-physical thing as a physical thing, right? They're trying to think of it as a machine, as a kind of mechanical thing, which why do that? They've rejected the idea that it's a mechanical thing. They're saying it can't be a physical mechanical thing. So why then invent this non-physical mechanical thing? That's the way I would interpret Ryle. But anyway, let's go back to it.
Thought they needed these internal gears turning, where the only evidence for it is what results. But he didn't try to describe what results without using ordinary mentalistic vocabulary.
Yeah, by the way, so this goes back to this other thing that I started but didn't finish talking about, the notions of reduction, which is, so there are some people who think that this kind of reduction is elimination. So if you reduce the concepts to the physical stuff, then what you show is that you don't need the mental concepts to understand anything about reality. So you could get rid of them and we could talk in a completely different way and go on with our lives and nothing would be lost. So, if you think about water and H2O, If the concept of water is reduced to the concept of H2O, then we don't need that concept. I mean, take an easier example. Think of bachelors and unmarried males. So the suppose that you think that that is a conceptual reduction, that bachelors are just unmarried males of a certain age eligible to be married. So circular, don't that. So all bachelors are unmarried, follows from that logically, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a case where we have a conceptual reduction. So we could get rid of the term bachelor if we wanted to and just talk about unmarried males of the eligible age, and nothing would be lost. It would take us a little longer to say stuff, but no expressive power would be lost. We wouldn't be missing out on any fact about reality. There'd be no eliminating that word. Yeah, I see someone's Queerdo's mentioning the churchlets, exactly. So they're the kind of eliminativists of that sort, and they're really only eliminativists of that sort. So a lot of people misinterpret the churchlets on exactly this point, I think, because they think they're really trying to eliminate the mind or something like that, but they're not. They're trying to eliminate the concepts we use to describe whatever it is that's going on there. Like clearly there's something there. They're having, thoughts, or as we would describe them, whatever, something is occurring. Whether it's accurately described as, intentional states that have representational contents that can be truth evaluated as like little sentences in a language like a thought. That's really what they're trying to eliminate. That whole, as I read and understand the church lens, they're trying to eliminate the conceptual stuff, not the ontological stuff. The stuff that's there is there. The way things are, the way things are. The mind, or whatever you want to call it, is that way. So so the kind of reduction that he's saying Ryle is against is that kind of reduction, that you can define these things. And that's really what the identity theorists of the 50s and 60s were saying too. What they were saying was, look, we don't think that this is something you know a priori. This is an empirical conjecture that the mind is identical to the brain or whatever. Okay, good. So Ryle, but I thought Ryle Ryle's a tough case, but I guess I don't know him well enough. Now I got to go listen to some Ryle. I think I saw a video on Philosophy Overdose of a Ryle interview or discussion. Turned into a full-time job doing this stuff.
No, I think Ryle had some influence, though not even the kind of mild reductionism that you found in Ryle as for reducing things like beliefs to dispositions and so forth.
Oh, I
that
see.
has no.
Yeah, because dispositions are not overt behavior, so there's already a problem there. But so even the early identity theorists, like if you go back and read the early papers by like Smart, Smart says he's basically agrees with Ryle about intentional states, beliefs, and so forth. Like, so these guys all kind of accepted this idea that the intentional states could be analyzed in terms of behavior or dispositions to behave. But then there was the consciousness stuff, the qualia, the raw feels, or whatever you want to call them. And there's where the identity theorists say those things are going to be brain states, but they didn't think that beliefs were brain states. They thought beliefs were dispositions to behave. I'm not saying I think that, and maybe there's a notion. I mean, the reason why you might think that is like when you're sleeping and you're dead asleep, do you believe that your name is so and so, or that your birthday is on that day? Well, I think there's a sense in which we want to say you do, even though you're not having any active mental state at all. Really, you're in a deep sleep, let's say. But isn't it true that you believe that your birthday's on a certain day? Yeah. Well, then in terms of what? Well, then if I woke you and asked you, you would say. So there's a disposition there to act in a certain way. So that seems reasonable. I also tend to think, though, that there's something called a belief, which, is like an occurrent mental state, like a thought is a little more like, I guess, a less loaded term. But anyway, so this stuff that there's, this weak reductionism, that there's these dispositions to behave. But then even Ryle thought there was a kind of residue or something left over from that, which would be the consciousness-y bit. So I don't think Ryle was a behaviorist about all this stuff. I think it's even open whether Skinner was. I was auditing a class on this stuff last year, and with David Rosenthal, this one, he was going in hard on the fact that Skinner wasn't really a behaviorist. He made some good points. But anyway, let's go back to Davidson.
Featured in my work.
To take up the theme of anomalous monism, I'm now going to be joined by...
Oh, that was the end? Wait, hold on, did I miss?
And so forth. That has never featured in my work.
Wait, what never featured? Okay, come on.
Needed these internal gears turning where the only evidence for it is what results. But he didn't try to describe what results without using ordinary mentalistic vocabulary.
Oh, I missed that. Oh, what results? Okay, so what results is the behavior. So what he's attributing there is the idea that we have the behavior, and then on the basis of that, we postulate this mechanical sort of gear thingamabob in the mind, which is not physical. Ryle's objecting to that, but the behavior is still going to be described in mental terms. So Ryle's going to say, look, when you're acting this way, that's you believing that the table is over there. When you're acting this way, that's you wanting the pen or whatever. And he's not going to say we should get rid of those terms. So that's the sense in which he's not a reductionist in this sense. He could still be a reductionist in the other ontological sense that we were talking about. If that's all there is to a belief is a disposition to behave, then I would say, yeah, isn't that an ontological reduction as opposed to a conceptual reduction? I was accused, I wrote about this. Someone accused me of this distinction not making sense. But to me, it seems to make sense. I mean, so the problem, of course, is that ontological reductions, if there's really only one thing, you can't reduce an A to a B, because all along there was only A or B. Like, there was just that one thing. But we can certainly postulate that there are these two things and then find out that there aren't, and in that sense, ontologically reduce them. Yeah, anyway, this is getting kind of long. So I want to hear something that Davies is going to say. This whole time with just the introductory stuff from this one guy who I don't know. All right, well, let's see what.
No, I think Ryle had some influence, though not even the kind of mild reductionism that you found in Ryle as for reducing things like beliefs to dispositions and so forth. That has never featured in my work.
Yeah, okay.
To take up the theme of anomalous monism, I'm now going to be joined by Martin Davies, who is Wild Reader in mental philosophy at Oxford University and Professor of Philosophy at Oxford University. Martin.
Hello, Martin.
Hello, Donald. Thanks so much, Rudy.
Okay, they're gonna start saying Bruce. G'day, Bruce. G'day, Bruce. Can I call you Bruce? No. Oh, do you guys know that Monty Python sketch? The Australian philosophy department, they're all named Bruce. He's New Zealander. He's not from Australia, right? I'm gonna get beat up over this. Okay. He might not even be from. Okay, I'm really gonna stop. I'm gonna stop.
If there was going to be a competition for the most discussed philosophical argument in the last 25 years, I suppose that the argument in the first few pages of Mental Events would be a strong contender for that title. It's a very simple argument in a way, superficially, just three premises and the conclusion which evidently follows.
What is that? There's an argument, a simple. I should have reread this paper. What's the simple argument? Let's see. It's got to be something about. Should we look it up? Well, we'll look it up later because I don't have a lot of time.
But it hasn't proved simple to understand. So I wondered if we might start out by you're just saying what the doctrine is, what the conclusion of the argument is. Can we do that in two chunks? It's a doctrine of anomalous monism. Can we just do the monism part? In what sense is the conclusion a claim of monism?
It's a claim that there are.
Okay, you know I can't resist. Can we see it on the? Oh, this is a book review. Oh, okay. Well, if I can't just find it right off the bat, then, oh, there's an argument here. Maybe the Stanford Encyclopedia will point us the way. I wonder why I can't find this online, though. Because I'm not looking very hard. Where's the argument? Ah. Okay. Okay. So it's the third one. So the first premise, some mental events causally interact with some physical events. Events related as cause and effect are covered by strict laws. There are no strict laws on the basis of which mental events can predict, explain, or be explained. Strict laws. Interesting. Okay, so those are the three premise. The anomalousness of the monism of the mental follows. Okay, interesting. All right, I think that's probably it.
Two different kinds of substance. Everything is physical, but that doesn't exclude many of those things being mental.
I mean, that is an important point, and this is something I gripe about a lot. By the way, I like to gripe, and this is definitely something I gripe about. What is griping? It means complaining, right? I hope that's what it means. Okay. Yeah, because you don't want to define the mental as not being physical, right? If you just like think, look, it's impossible for the mental to be physical, then it seems like you've defined it that way already. The mental is whatever it is. It could be physical, it could be non-physical. I mean, we have to start from that place, right? We have to start from it seems to me anyway, that you have to start from you can't tell from it being mental whether it's physical or not. But I get the feeling that a lot of people sort of jump right from the fact that it's mental to that it can't be physical. And we do, in common sense terms, distinguish mental from physical. But we also distinguish humans from animals, and humans are a kind of animal. But we tend to do that when there's something special, like we're a special kind of animal. So we do say, my son told me the other day that humans aren't animals. Well, what are we then? Fish? I mean, mushrooms, plants, minerals. What else is there? So animals, plants, minerals, fungus. So we are animals. We're special animals. So we contrast human with animal. It doesn't mean that humans are non-animals. The same might be true for mental. Mental and physical are contrasted, but that doesn't mean that they exclude each other. The same would be true for the idealist, right? The idealist wants to say the physical is mental. So you can't define the physical as excluding the mental either. I don't think you want to start from a position of excluding definitionally the other side. I think that's an important point.
Many ways of describing the same things, but this is a particularly important case of a dual vocabulary, and so the basic idea is quite clearly the same as Spinoza. One sort of substance.
Spinoza. Why you gotta roll up on me like that? Spinoza, dual aspect theory? Like there's one stuff that has two aspects. That's not the same as one stuff, two descriptions, is it? That's not the same. By the way, I approve of the solipsism pushback. I talked to a solipsist, or he talked to himself. But yeah, solipsism is the ultimate parsimony. I still don't think idealism is more parsimonious, though. Whether you have to get in all these like alter egos, some kind of weird something or another, God existing, something weird has to. So I don't buy the parsimony argument, but I don't think parsimony arguments should be taken very seriously because one man's parsimony is another man's parsnips. I don't know. It's no good. It's a vegetable. The point is, people will disagree about what's parsimonious. Like I'm always hearing people say panpsychism is the most parsimonious view. It's like the most parsimonious view is the one that accepts all and only the things that our current science accepts. That's the most parsimonious view. Anyway.
Think about it, describe it, explain it in physical terms. You can explain it.
Oh yeah, that's what got me started. So yeah, Spinoza's not a. So I feel like what he's talking about here is what we nowadays call conceptual dualism. That there's two sets of concepts, one that describes the physical stuff and one that describes the mental stuff. And what he's arguing is that there's no connection between them. And in fact, the mental stuff's even more fucked up because there's no connection between any of that stuff either. But that's not the same as saying they're two distinct aspects. Although I guess what he's going to say is like, we can't eliminate the mental stuff conceptually wise because we'd be missing out on something. And there, maybe then it's hard to make sense of in what sense is it really just physical. Yeah, this is tough. How is he going to do this? All right, okay, let's
describe it in mentalistic terms. These don't conflict with each other; they're just alternatives, and we couldn't.
Wait, what was that? Wait, hold on. I'm being distracted by someone in the chat. Our current science is exhaustive of most of reality. The core theory, as people sometimes call it, is pretty good. But I was just saying the most parsimonious view is just the one that doesn't go beyond what's already accepted. And if you can explain everything you need to explain with that, then that's obviously the most parsimonious view. Adding things to it is adding things to it, therefore less parsimonious. That's that. But what's this Timothy William objection? Roughly, idealism assumes a background theory that makes it self-defeating. I guess I don't know that objection. Is he talking about objective idealism? I don't think he is he? Because most philosophers ignore that as a serious view, and they only talk about Berkeley idealism, which no one gives a shit about. I mean, maybe some people do, but yeah, I don't know.
This is not part of the thesis of anomalous monism, but it's a thesis of mine. We couldn't get along without both. Nothing would constitute a way of thinking about the world that didn't contain both of these elements.
That's what I was just saying. Wait a minute, did he say
these don't conflict with each other?
Wait.
Substance. You can think about it, describe it, explain it in physical terms. You can explain it, describe it in mentalistic terms. These don't conflict with each other; they're just alternatives, and we couldn't. This is not part of the thesis of anomalous monism, but it's a thesis of mine. We couldn't get along.
Wait, so he just said it's not it's not a commitment of anomalous monism. I thought I would have thought it was, but so what he's saying is you could have a version of anomalous monism that was basically like a limitivist. Uh, is that what he's saying? That you could have an limitivist version of this, a like not a reductive version, because he's gonna anomalous means non-reductive. So there's no reduction conceptually from the mental to the physical or from the mental to the mental. Yeah. So you could think that's true, but then also think that you could get along just fine by eliminating the mental concepts. That's throwing me off. I would not have thought um, this was the case. So I guess who are the persons that he's aiming this at? So certainly the pragmatists. Um, oh, someone just said pragmatics. Yeah, exactly. Like I think he's talking about the Carnaps, right? So because you might think like in the background is this kind of anti-metaphysical picture that comes from like someone like Carnap, who thinks that there are like internal questions and external questions. So like within a conceptual scheme, it's all coming clear because he wrote that paper against the conceptual scheme, um, on the very idea of a conceptual scheme, and he talks smack about it. Uh, but for Carnap, there's internal and external questions. So questions that are internal to a conceptual framework can be answered, but when you go outside of the conceptual framework and try to ask questions about the framework or compare it, then they don't have any good answers. So why? Uh, so one thing he might be doing here is he might be saying, look, we want to distinguish ourselves from those kind of Carnapian kind of deflationists about metaphysics. We're going to say, look, it's all just pragmatics. You pick whichever one's useful. Carnap said stuff like that in various places. Like all of these conceptual schemes, which one's really describing what's going on? Well, you pick different ones for different things. We use the conceptual scheme of ordinary objects to move around the world. We use the conceptual scheme of atoms and quarks to do physics. And they're not competing with each other. They're just like, it depends on what's useful for you. That's pragmatism. Um, my butchered version of pragmatism, the carcass of pragmatism. Anyway, you get the idea. So he's saying though that his version is not that he thinks that we would lose something. So he could be like a real patterns guy, like a Dennett guy, and say that as well. But I wonder, what would we lose? Because all those strict laws, the law, like by strict law, they mean they exclude things that are caritas paribus. Like, you have a law that this works, um, granting certain conditions, or all things being equal, or, only on Tuesdays, or, it's got to be like, F equals MA, no exceptions. So I'm getting distracted by trying to read the chat. So I'm going to just try to finish this, and then maybe I'll figure out what's going on over there. But, the strict laws, the ones that are exceptionless, are going to be physical laws, on his view. You're not going to have them at the mental level. You're not going to have a law that connects being in pain to any other, like believing that it's bad or anything like that. You're not going to have any kind of connection between the concept of pain and the physical state. I mean, you might have some regularity, some caritas paribus, just to be clear. You might have some other things, but you're not going to have a strict law. That's why the strict thing is important at the psychological level. So you get a complete picture of the causal structure of the world by just looking at the physical stuff. So what's going to be missing by not knowing about, on his view? I mean, I know what would be missing on my view. I mean, on the anomalous monist view that he's defending here, what would be missing if you eliminated the mental concepts? All the same cause and effects would be the case. All the same behaviors would be the case. I don't know. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's figure out what is going on in the chat. What does based mean? Liminativism is based. Does that mean like, I think I heard the word based before, but I don't know what it means. It means cool. I have no idea. Okay, so why can't you make up anti-religious claim around mental concepts while also saying that mental concepts are dispensable? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Okay, we should have quality of formalism along. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. Yeah, no, I think wonks. Why do you guys make me say these things out loud? Wonks. Queerdo. What are these? Are these real words? Richard. Is that a weird word? Who knows? Haha. By the way, are names words? They're not. They wouldn't be in the dictionary. Let's see here. Yeah. I'm getting distracted. All right, let's get back to this. I also keep saying I have to go, but then this keeps getting interesting, so we're going to keep
Without
chugging along.
both. Nothing would constitute a way of thinking about the world that didn't contain both of these elements.
Nothing would constitute a way of thinking about the world that didn't have both these elements. So in other words, an ideal reasoner who only had the physical concepts would be missing something. But what would they be missing? Not causal stuff. Yeah. Is he going to say more?
The monism, which is opposed to substance dualism, is part of the claim, but it would be we wouldn't characterize your view correctly if we said that the monism amounted to a monism about substance which could participate in radically different kinds of events, physical events on the one hand and mental events on the other hand. That wouldn't get the position quite right.
Oh, you mean because there still would be two different kinds of events?
The thought is that
Yeah.
the monism here involves this claim that every mental event is, as a matter of fact, the very same thing, the very same particular thing as a physical event.
That's right. The ontology includes events, objects, as we say, and events.
By the way, that's very controversial because events are hard to type. Like what World War One? When did it start? How long did it last exactly? When was it over? If there's a guy trapped in the forest somewhere thinking it's still going on, is it or not? Things like that. But then how you introduce them to do logic, right? That was Davidson's other famous project, was that he thought you needed to have events. You have to quantify over events in your basic logical stuff. So usually in propositional logic at the lower level, you don't have events, you just have propositions, sentences, things, not sentences, propositions are true or false, sentences express those propositions, etc., etc. But you don't have events as an element, right? You can have names, you can have quantifiers, you can have predicates, you can have properties maybe in higher level logics, but not events. And so Davidson thought you needed to do that. And the reason was because you wanted to say things like if he's walking quickly, therefore he's walking. So quickly seems to modify the event of walking, and that seems to be a logical relationship, right? So you could say if he's walking quickly, therefore he's walking. So there had seemingly had better be a way that you could capture that kind of inference, the mind moving from the one to the other, but you can't really in the way logic is formally thought about without events, because you don't have a way of saying that there is a walking. There exists an X that's a walking, and the walking was done quickly. You can say John is walking or something like that, but you can't just say, walking. You need to be able to talk about events to do that. So that was his big thing. And mental, so he's the idea that mental events are events, and so should be captured in that rubric or whatever. But I think Martin Davies is correct here, and I think he affirmed it, that really ultimately those mental events are physical. Okay.
And the monism certainly applies to both.
So if we're thinking about
Monism applies to both. So the mental events are physical. physical events are mental, right?
You would be wrong if you were right on this monism point. Then there'd be a range of different views. I wondered if I might just sketch 2 or 3 of them, just so that we can have them on a back burner in case it proves illuminating to mention them later. One kind of view which would be, I guess, wrong if you're right, is a view which says that there are mental events and there are physical events, and mental events are somehow composed out of or constituted by physical events, though not identical with them. So we're familiar with these constitution claims in other areas of philosophy where you have an is.
And this kind of idea is coming back with the grounding literature, by the way, because grounding has become quite popular, I would say, due to certain persons who shall remain unnamed. Timothy Wilson, no, just kidding. But Kit Fine, I think, is one actual person who you could blame this on, amongst others. He's not the only one. But, now we have Jonathan Shepard going around talking about grounding physicalism, saying that, you might have these mental things which are grounded in the physical, and then you get a kind of non-reductive physicalism, grounding physicalism. I think it's like it's a functional view that they're grounded in the functional states or something like that. But there, you would say they're not identical. The mental stuff is not identical to the physical in the same way that the statue is grounded in its material. They're not the same thing. I don't know. I always wondered, like, aren't they the same thing? The statue and the material it's made out of. Right, yeah. Aristotle's argument was that you could break the statue but not the material, and therefore the statue isn't the material because you could break it and the statue would be gone, but the material would still be there. And Kripke had the example of a book or something like that. The book could be what was his example? The book could be unfinished, or I forget his actual example. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point, though, is that these kind of claims are familiar. But at least while the statue isn't broken, aren't they the same? Yeah, exactly. So someone just mentioned in the chat, I'm seeing Schaffner and that's who I was talking about, Jonathan Schaffer. I know I need to have Barbara Montero on my podcast. I know her; she's great. I think she's leaving the CUNY though, actually, sadly. But she's very smart, and yeah, she has interesting ideas on this stuff. Anyway, let's get back to this. But yeah, I'm liking this. Following the chats. I got to do more of these live streams. They're pretty cool.
Constitution, which is not the is of identity. Another kind of view, perhaps, would be the view that says that there are physical goings on, there are mental occurrences, but that there's just no way, in principle, to tell how much of the physical goings on we should seek to put a lasso around as a kind of candidate for identity with the mental occurrence. And then there'd be,
Yeah, so that even though there's just the physical, there's no good way to identify some substrate of it, a limited area of which we want to say that's the mental. Who's going to be these in this camp? Like, are these an activist, like someone who's like an Alvin Noe, who thinks that the mind somehow in the environment, the mind is the mind, like Merleau-Ponty and all those, that whole line, is that the kind of person he has in mind here? And activism, yeah. I always have a problem with like the embodied and active, the 4 E's. I don't understand why it's supposed to be such a big deal, but I don't understand lots of things. So.
Third sort of view, which wouldn't quite deserve the title of a dualism about events either, but rather would be the view that somehow the question of identity between mental and physical events doesn't make sense. And that would be the view that there's a scheme, a conceptual scheme, a kind of discourse or way of going on about mental matters. There's another scheme, way of going on about physical matters. We understand identity questions well enough within...
You see that look when he said scheme? Uh-huh. The very idea.
The mental scheme. We understand identity questions well enough within the physical scheme, but there's no stance or no point that we can stand upon in order to raise the question of identity across the schemes. Now, was any of those views explicit?
That would be the Carnap, right? The kind of Carnap view. So he laid out the three views. You have the Constitution view. I'd say in modern terms, that's the grounding camp. Then in the middle position, you have maybe the extended guys that there's no like real boundary line. It's not the, saying it's this physical state or that physical state. And then, all right. So I think these map on. All right, good. Sorry.
Or lying in the back of your mind as a target for the argument in the mental events paper.
No. And in fact, some of those suggestions may or perhaps ought to prompt some softening of the doctrine of anomalous monism. I'm not sure about the vagueness of
Soften it. I mean, if the physical states are so vague, then maybe we can't give strict laws. So you'd have to soften this idea that the laws are strict. If the mind isn't extending into the body or the environment, then maybe physical descriptions of the environment may play some role in helping us understand how the mind works, and therefore maybe there are some laws that would apply. So maybe that's where the softening would occur. Interesting.
boundaries of
Wait, what did he say?
softening of the doctrine of anomalous monism. I'm not sure about the vagueness of boundaries of events. It seems to me there are certainly questions about how much space, so to speak, an event is taking up. Okay. The time element is not so hard to deal with. The same sort of question arises with respect to physical objects.
Exactly.
Where does a river exactly end, or where does it exactly begin? We don't feel any great need to decide that, or how many.
Don't we? Depends on the politics. Where is that river? Anything valuable near the edge of it?
How many square miles does Kilimanjaro take up? Well, where does it leave off exactly? And in fact, I mean, all kinds of questions can be raised if you want to get worried about it. Does it get bigger when there's more snow on it, or is the mountain itself still the same size? Who cares?
We just had this exact debate in New York City about the Freedom Towers. They wanted to make it a certain height, 1776. Symbolic reasons, yay, America. 1776. There was a debate. Should it be the tallest building in the city, or should it have the symbolic height? Anyway, so however that turned out, they eventually got it to be that height by putting a little antenna on top. And people were saying the building's not that height because the antenna is not part of the building. And other people were like, once it's attached, it is part of the... And they were actually having a mereology discussion. Something that you would really only find in a philosophy class, usually, about whether it's the same object or not. But anyway, yeah, people did care, actually. But you're right, it doesn't make any real practical. I mean, you pick one and you decide it. But it's not the sort of thing that really matters.
And I think events are the same way. We don't know exactly where to draw the boundaries. We can, if need arises, we can decide these things, just as we could decide, I guess, in the case of a mountain, one way or another. And even counting becomes difficult. I mean, take some area. How many mountains are there? Is Kilimanjaro really two mountains? Has two peaks?
Yeah.
Or is it just one mountain with two peaks? Well, yeah, again, we just decide. It's arbitrary. And I think all of these things go for events also.
The questions about vagueness, I think we might hold.
But that doesn't really answer the question, right? I mean, I guess he did answer it, because the question was like, there are these three views which are sort of like yours, but not quite. So were you targeting any one of them? Davidson said no. But then he went on that rant about vagueness and said that's a problem for everybody, basically, right? That's, you know, and it's every rock of another peak, exactly. So those sorts of issues aren't really interesting. You know, Dennett made that point too. He's like, people get all worked up about that stuff, like the Empire State Building and sorry, the Freedom Tower, and whether it's taller or not, the building itself taller. Dennett compared that to Schmess, like a game just like chess, but to where the king can move two spaces, and people could get all interested in talking about the relations of the pieces on the board. He didn't think it was very interesting. I don't know. Mathematicians do talk about infinite chess, and like, suppose you're on a chessboard of infinite length, and like, are they wasting their time doing that? I guess Dennett thinks yes. I don't think I think the same. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I mean, I'm seeing I just have some food over here. I kind of want to eat it, so I do have to go. But I do want to hear the rest of this too. So give me 5 more minutes, and then I think I'm going to end this. But let's see how this goes.
To one side. Perhaps the view which we might keep a little bit in mind is the possible position which says that even after all questions of boundaries have been settled to the extent that they need to be, still it's not quite right to say that the mental event is identical with the physical event, but they stand in some other rather intimate relation, which might be a little bit like the relation that a lump of bronze can stand in to a statue, for example. People think this is not the identity relation, but clearly the lump of bronze is taking up just about the same space at any given time as the statue, so it's a very intimate sort of relationship. I wonder whether that view as something which would be strictly speaking incompatible with the monism of the mental events paper might be kept as a possible focus for later discussion.
Yeah,
Well, I wonder.
So, he wonders. Gonna have some smart ass comments. What's it gonna?
The case of the statue and the lump of bronze, it's clear enough why people want to make a distinction, because one of them lasts longer than the other.
Yeah, that's Aristotle's.
And it's not as though this puzzles us.
That's the Aristotle argument I was mentioning earlier, right? Break the statue, not the bronze.
Some way. They're not identical. Well, neither am I identical with me just between the ages of 1 and 2, because one lasted a little longer than the other.
I'm not identical to me in that age span. Wait, what? So, someone's saying eat my food. I know, I am smelling it over here. By the way, it's hey guys, you want a chip? Chili and chips. This hylomorphic argument, yeah, Aristotle was arguing for hylomorphism, and hylomorphism is the view that like the statue is distinct from the material that it composes it, even though they're in this other relationship of composition. So I something like grounding is very similar, I would say, but What's the point about the 1 to 2 year old? So there's a period of time, me between 1 and 2 years old. Yeah. I'm not identical to that segment of me. Okay. So the statue isn't identical to the. Wait, what's the I'm losing the analogy. Am I just getting hungry? What's going on?
People want to make a distinction because one of them lasts longer than the other. And it's not as though this puzzles us in some way. They're not identical. Well, neither am I identical with me just between the ages of 1 and 2, because one lasted a little longer than the other. I mean, if somebody were to say, well, there's a period during which the lump of bronze and the statue are identical, and then there's a period when they're not. Probably something rather analogous to that could be said about events. But again,
Hey, my man. So, but what? So there was a time when you were that person between 1 and 2 years old. And then you grew. So you're not identical to that thing anymore. But there was a time when you were identical to that thing. So you break the statue, they're not identical anymore. But there was a time during which they were the same thing. I mean, does that work? Yeah. So you may have to play fast and loose with what you mean by identical. Which these guys liked to do back in those days before Kripke. But this is 97. Well past Kripke o'clock. So yeah, but that's, yeah, you could say during that time. So he's going to say to the composition grounding people, the mind is identical to the brain while you're alive. That does sound like hylomorphism. I mean, you know, Aristotle's view about the mind was that it's basically the body functioning. So people like to say he's a functionalist in some sense, but Oh yeah, so I see people talking about hylomorphism in the chat now, and someone's mentioning Jaworski. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't buy that argument though. But Schaffner, I think the grounding functionalism, I think he admits you get this kind of similar sort of issue. I don't know. Anyway, okay. Holy moly. Let's finish this because I'm getting too distracted. My brain is like a hamster. It's been kept in a cage all its life, now set free. There's food over here, philosophy over there, doesn't know which way to go. The hamster would go to the food, but I will go to the philosophy.
I don't see how it touches the identity theory.
Oh, wait, what?
Analogous to that could be said about events. But again, I don't see how it touches the identity theory. I'm certainly willing to say, insist, the question exactly what physical event is the same as my noticing that glass of water. It seems to me as something that we can't easily settle, but that the mental event is identical with some physical event seems to me all that I'm really interested in maintaining. But it does seem to me, if all the neurological things that are going on inside of me weren't the way they are, then I certainly wouldn't be noticing what I am or thinking what I am.
But that doesn't. You say the same about the statue. If the arrangement of the particles weren't that way, then it wouldn't be bronze that was making this up. Doesn't show they're identical, although reasons already said, tend to already think that, but it's not really an argument. Yeah, I don't know. Huh. Yeah, but temporal persistence here is the identity condition. So that's what they mean by temporal persistence, as I understand it. Someone, Jay is saying, isn't the only, if you smash the statue, it doesn't survive, but the clay does. Yeah, the temporal persistence means exists through time. Statue ceases to exist at a certain point, but the clay doesn't. Unless I was misunderstanding. But yeah. All right, let's just.
Well, the monism of substance wouldn't quite exhaust the content of the monism in the conclusion of the argument in mental events, would it? Because there's something more, something about the events themselves, something along the lines that it wouldn't be right to think that there were mental events and these were completely other than physical events.
Quite right. Yes, yes, yes. My ontology of particulars in this world includes both objects and events, and the monism goes for both.
So the conclusion of the argument is going to be that every mental occurrence, every dated mental event, is the same particular thing as a physical event.
Some physical event.
Some physical event. And that's the monism. And now perhaps we come to the harder part of the doctrine, the anomalousness.
Right.
So anomalous monism, what is that?
Oh, Martin Davies. All right, guys, I do got to go. I'll save this. I'll come back and do this again another time. This was fun. I appreciate your feedback and comments along the way. So I'll definitely try to do another live version of these. Obviously, I like doing the live things because I do consciousness live, but normally I don't do these reactions live, or I haven't yet. So it's fun, though. So maybe I'll keep doing it. Cool, guys. Thanks. Stay soon.